Welcome to Spoonful of Strength, a podcast for people with chronic illness and the ones who love them, where we talk all things chronic. Here's your host, Rachel and Tina.
Welcome to Spoonful of Strength. Today's episode, we have Dani joining us, and she will be talking about her diagnosis with rheumatoid arthritis and the journey that she has been going on with that disease. So how have you been doing this week, Rachel?
I'm doing good. I'm slowly recovering, and I see the surgeon in 4 days, so we'll see what he thinks of how it's going. But I think I'm making good progress. But I want to talk about you because I think you have something to tell our listeners that I'm so excited to hear in person. I got the text yesterday, but why don't you tell us what you've been up to?
Yeah. So this past Saturday, I had my latest PET scan, and that came back all clear again. So that makes 3.5 years. Yeah, 3.5 years of clear. So another year and a half of that magical milestone of 5 years. Once I hit that 5 years is when she'll hopefully be willing to take my port out. So I mean, it's one of those that she's nervous about taking it out, even though it's not being used, but I still have to go in every 6 to 8 weeks to get it, to keep it flushed out. Otherwise it'll close up and they won't be able to access it. So I've been, every time I have a new PET scan that comes back clear for the past year or so, I've been trying to convince her that we could take it out, and she still won't do it.
So you've got 3 more scans left to get.
Yeah, we're
to
doing them every
years?
Yep. Yeah, we do them every 6 months now, which is better than before. I used to do them every quarter. Remember, it was like 4 times a year I was getting those scans done. So it's kind of nice to only be every 2 times a year. So
yeah, I was nervous. I told Ed, I said, because I know sometimes you get the reports quicker, you get the scans quicker. So it was like Saturday afternoon, and I'm like, I wonder if she's going to hear today. I wonder. And then Monday came along, and it was like 10 o'clock, and I'm like, I haven't heard anything yet. And I think I was probably more
I
nervous
I was trying not to worry, because this was the first time that I've ever had one done on a weekend. Usually I can see the report. I have it done first thing in the morning, and by late afternoon, usually before dinner time, I'm able to read the report. And so I was trying not to get too nervous over the fact that I wasn't seeing the report. And then I did find actually a little spot where a place to drill down when I log into the portal that'll show if the report's even been done or not. So then I started looking, going, okay, they haven't even written the report. So it's not a matter that it was written and wasn't released because there was something in there. They just didn't do it because it was the weekend. But the funny part is every time I log in to review those records, it keeps an activity log. And I was checking it like nonstop. And I'm hoping that I'm the only one that can see how many times over 3 days that I logged in, because I think there was probably 50 times before I finally was able to see the report.
I've done that before.
Usually I keep myself amused by looking at, I'll compare the photos. Like they do I looked, they do 1,090 images every time they do a PET scan. Which was pretty interesting. That was another spot where when I found that little spot to drill down, I guess I never really realized how many. I knew there was a ton, but I never realized how many images are there. So
yeah. Yep. Well, we are happy for you. You got 6 months to breathe and until the next one comes around.
Yep.
So that's good.
Yep. I forgot to tell you, I found my missing coffee mug. Remember when we recorded the other day, I could not figure out where I put my coffee cup down at. I don't know if that made the cut or not on the editing, but it was,
I think so.
Later that night, it was bedtime. I finally found it. It was in our master bathroom, on the counter in the master bathroom, which I did not even remember stepping foot in that morning. to leave it there.
Yeah.
So I must have walked into the bathroom at some point in the morning when I was getting ready and set it down and forgot that I ever even went into that room.
Well, it's a good thing you found it and didn't leave it for like 2 weeks and you're like wondering what
Put a little bit of
smells so
coffee.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it would have been so gross because I always put creamer in my coffee. So yeah, that would have been quite disgusting.
Oh my
Not that
gosh.
I'm kind of bad about leaving my travel mugs in my car, especially this time of year. It can be kind of gross, but
Okay, so this is a first for me. But this is definitely my brain not working. So um Dani just messaged me and said, "Are we meeting today?" And I'm like, "Look, I forgot to send her the link." And
oh
so
no.
I'm like, because we're like waiting here, like, is she coming? And so she texted me and said, "Are we meeting today?" And I'm like, "Well, dumb me didn't send you the link." So she should be on here shortly.
Awesome.
But
Great.
welcome to the wonderful world of cognitive impairment.
Hey, at
Join
least you
us
didn't think
daily.
you're going blind.
Yeah. Oh, you gotta say that story while we're waiting on her to come in.
While we're waiting
That's,
for her to join us.
yeah.
So, I wear contacts and my left eye, I've always had a lazy eye. Like my vision is awful. The best they can correct it, I think they get me to 20/60 in my left eye. So my right eye is a little bit better, not much, but there's still like a plus, like there's a how when they do your contacts, it's like plus
Yeah.
so many numbers. So like my right eye is like a plus 3.25 and my left eye is a plus 4.25. So pretty big difference. And I
Yeah.
use daily wears, so I take them out and throw them out every day. So the other day, I went 3 days thinking that I had something new going on with my eyes because my vision was affected. But I staged my boxes of contacts with left and right on my bathroom counter, and like it took me 3 days to start wondering if maybe I might have had the boxes mixed up. In the meantime, I'm thinking that I have some sort of disease and I'm going to end up losing my vision. And then when I finally checked the boxes, I actually had them mixed up. So I don't have some new disease that's affecting my vision.
Well, you just recorded that interview with M, and she was talking about her, losing her
Oh
vision in
yeah,
her
with the
right
optical,
eye.
yeah, the optical thing that
Yeah.
happened with her. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were
I was
probably
like, this is just
freaking
great.
out.
What else is going to happen? So, and then I'm like, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe I just, in my mind, I'm like, well, surely I haven't put the wrong contacts in the wrong eye for 3 days straight. But sure enough, I did.
Mhm.
So, all right, Dani is
Oh,
ready to join us here. So I'm going to pull her.
okay. Do you want to welcome her
So, yep.
in?
So that's the newest cognitive,
Oh my
cognitive story
God.
there on our end.
Add it to our reel of
Yep. Yep.
welcome to the podcast that we invited you on, but didn't actually give you the link to actually get you on here.
No problem. I was not, I
Oh,
figured it was something as simple as that.
well, welcome, Dani. Thank you so much for coming on
Yeah, thank you
today.
for having
We
me.
really appreciate it. Tina's not too much on Instagram, but I've been following you on Instagram and getting to know you a little bit. But
Yeah.
go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. Hi, I am Dani. I'm 39. I live in Pennsylvania, but I'm originally from the Jersey Shore. And I have rheumatoid arthritis. Got diagnosed officially a couple of years ago. Probably have had it since my son was born, which is going to be 10 years ago soon. And then before that, kind of a childhood of undiagnosed, uncertain sort of joint pain, all stemming from an ankle injury, ankle malformation, possibly. It was broken, they think, upon delivery. And because I was adopted, it wasn't dealt with at the time and healed to a certain point. Kids are resilient. And then when I was 7, evidently, again, I sort of don't remember any of this, but I was evidently 7, very active. Let me go with that. Very active, gymnast, dancer, running around all the time. Fell on the playground, probably jumping off the monkey bars if I had to make a guess. And I landed on it wrong, and the whole ankles just sort of fell apart and I couldn't walk, which then led to the next, pretty much till I was 18, seeing a pediatric, um, different orthopedic surgeons, orthopedists in and out of different hospitals for different scans, and no one could really figure it out. But I kind of went on with life, played sports, played field hockey predominantly. And then when I was in college, they got rid of the hockey program. So I found myself for the first time without a sport and didn't, kind of was a lazy college student. And while I was active in a lot of other things, I did not find another sport. So over the next 4 to 5 years, my ankle really deteriorated. So by the time I was 25, I found a surgeon who was willing to go in, take out all the arthritis that had built up, put in pins and screws, and basically take it apart and put it back together. And then I was in and out of PT. I was in PT before the surgery, in it after the surgery. And then I pretty much got cleared out of PT, went back to my doctors, and wound up having my daughter like a year and a half later, and had my son 18 months after that, which all probably triggered the RA, which is what my rheumatologist thinks. And but because I had a very, very high pain threshold, sort of from this life of just dealing with different joint pain, I thought it was just being a new mom with 2 kids under 2 and breastfeeding and being exhausted. And I thought that's what all of that pain and discomfort was. No, turns out it was kind of the RA starting. And then I found a new GP in the middle of the pandemic because mine had retired. And she happened to have RA herself, took one look at me, looked at my hands and said, "You have RA." I went, "Oh, okay. What do we do about it?" And she goes, "Well, I'm going to get you to my rheumatologist." As a lot of your audience will know, specialists are not easy to get appointments with on a really quick basis. I lucked out because doctor to doctor, she called him and said, "Hey, I need you to see this patient." And I was in his office sitting in front of him within 2 months, which is a pretty quick turnaround. And then we started me on hydroxychloroquine. That lasted about a year. It helped, but then my body sort of quickly metabolized it and it stopped working. And we realized that. And I've been on Humira for the last almost year and a half, almost 18 months. And that's been life-changing. It's been amazing. So I've really felt good. Still have flares, still have bad days like everybody. But really the Humira has allowed me to sort of function fairly normally within a range. So that's sort of the abbreviated version.
Did you know Spoonful of Strength is not just a podcast? We have an Instagram page called Spoonful of Strength where you can see clips of our upcoming episodes, learn about different illnesses, and we share other people's stories. We also have an Etsy shop where you can shop for clothing such as t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies. You can find candles and mugs and tumblers and blankets. You can find it all. We support all chronic illnesses, and the great thing is, if you find a t-shirt in our shop for multiple sclerosis, we can change that for lupus or Ehlers-Danlos or any other illness that you need. Everything is customizable in our shop. Use the code PODCAST for 20% off your entire order.
One of Rachel's brother-in-law, one of my brothers has RA. So I know that there's a genetic component to that. And I know you mentioned, obviously you mentioned you were adopted, so you don't necessarily know, like, based on just general knowledge, if that could be, have they done any kind of genetic testing to see if you are a carrier for that?
No, we haven't. We haven't. So, and knock on wood, both my kids have been extremely healthy and so far no issues. There were some things that when I was when my parents got me at 5 weeks, there were some other weird flags that were thrown. Sort of, I had some like weird, evidently like markings, some different things that my pediatrician at the time was like, I don't know, she could have this, 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 and this. None of it panned out. So my current rheumatologist thinks that it is largely environmental to whatever I was exposed to that may have laid the groundwork for this, considering I kind of have a history of all these weird things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the ankle, that really has nothing to do with RA. It's just two separate. Okay.
Two separate things to the point where now when I was getting diagnosed, I went back to my parents, and we were both living, thankfully, and said like, hey, was I ever tested for JRA? And this was the early 90s, right? So I don't even know kind of what that looked like at the time, but my mom still had all my records and went back and looked and said like, no, it was, evidently it was listed and it was negative.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird situation, but they think I was an emergency C-section. We know that much. They think the doctor like literally probably pulled me out breech from my feet and broke it or misaligned it. Your baby's bones are so fragile. And so, then I was sort of, and I don't think this was anybody's fault. I think it was just the state of the things at the time, but I was sort of just put in a bassinet and then sent off to a nursery for kids who were waiting till they got adopted. And I don't know that it was ever properly addressed, maybe because it wasn't swollen, maybe because it didn't look, like it needed to. And the surgeon that finally sort of fixed it said, like, I think it just healed badly and it was never addressed.
Yeah.
Do you still, now that it's been rebuilt, do you find that area, does that still flare up as far as pain wise, especially with the RIA going on? And
it's no, it's like the best part about me, honestly.
I would imagine probably a lot of that is the amount of surgery there is, that's where you start cutting into those nerve ending. If they're having to rebuild, I imagine that's something with the nerve pathways.
Yeah, he sliced and diced me up real good, and it certainly was totally rebuilt. And I don't get stiff there. I don't now. I have metal plates and screws, and all of that may come into play with keeping the inflammation down. But yeah.
So you didn't actually. It was 7 when you injured your ankle at that time. So did you have like constant pain, like as even like a 5-year-old, before that accident?
No, I was totally, this is why it came so out of the blue, because I was, as my parents will tell you, a pepper pot and constantly running, jumping, landing, climbing trees. You're very typical tomboy who just was in everything and wanted to do everything, and which is why I was in dance and gymnastics, just to try and burn me out.
How difficult as a 7-year-old, when we're young, we're pretty, and especially one that's very active and very adventurous, that had to have been pretty difficult to have that level of restrictions, as you were healing. Did you find, what did you find that kind of helped that energy you're used to burning?
It was a hard switch. Yeah. My parents did a really good job of finding other outlets, and I was cleared to swim, which was the greatest thing ever, because I grew up on the shore, right? So at the beach. So luckily for me, access to pools in the ocean was, immediate. So that certainly helped. I also got really good at things like making friendship bracelets and painting, and I learned how to cross stitch. I was real into American Girls, again, early 90s. So I kind of learned how to make clothes for my dolls and like all of that sort of creative outlet. Really, my parents were like, you want to try this? Let's go for it. And that certainly was a big help to mentally keep me sort of stimulated. And I
Yeah.
read everything and anything somebody gave me.
Yeah. So from 7, did they fix your ankle then at 7? Like from 7 to the actual reconstruction surgery at 25? Like what happened there?
I think so. No, it wasn't fixed. It was maintenance, I would say. I was in a series of sort of soft casts, orthotics, inserts, pretty much that a lot of that time was in sneakers. That was the basic care routine I was in because they didn't want to do surgery because of my growth plates and because they were worried largely at the time that given the technology they had and the depth of the x-rays and the CAT scans and the MRIs, they couldn't see what they were going into. And my orthopedic surgeon at the time was very much sort of against going in blind and doing more damage. Which as it turns out was probably the right call. Because even when in 2010, when I kind of had the surgery and everything, that surgeon was even like, "Oh, that it went really well. It was great, but yeah, there was a lot going on in there." So I learned how to kind of just work around it as kids are, apt to do. And I just wore, like tie top sneakers, and I learned how to ace bandage myself. And if I need a little extra support, I just kind of learned how to deal with it. And then once I found field hockey, I really just kind of dove in head forward. And the more I played and the stronger I got, I was in a different kind of pain. I was sore and I was achy, but I realized over time I really wasn't in the same sort of like atrophy joint pain that I had probably been experiencing before.
Mm-hmm. Just the simple building your other muscles up as you helped support that, gave you better support of that specific spot.
Yes.
I was stalking you on Instagram. No. I was looking on your Instagram and I saw a post that you had made that talked about that you had a lot of pain at a young age, but you didn't mention it because you didn't want to be a burden. And I think that women do that sometimes, we're the last ones to get looked after, last ones to go to the doctor and all that. But for you to be so young and feeling that, can you kind of explain what that was like?
There were a lot of other sort of things going on in my orbit. I won't get too specific, but there were other things that I knew had I felt I know how to deal with this. I can tough it out. Again, probably that like female brain that just is, we are innately doing that. I just kind of was like, you know what? I'm going to lay here. Yes, it's the middle of the night. Yes, this is very painful. Or I'm just going to turn over. I'm just going to read a book. I'm just going to do whatever I need to do. And sometimes it got to a point where, yeah, I went in and I cried and I took Tylenol and went back to bed. To my, told my parents and got them up. But the vast majority of the time, I was kind of like, you know what? There's enough going on. I'm good. I'll figure this out. I think I just sort of took to doing that. Not a great trait to start. Certainly led to probably the prolonging of my diagnosis. And later on, probably that same mentality is what I went, I'm just going to push through. I've got 2 little kids. I just got to push through this. But yeah, I think I just sort of realized there's a lot going on. I'll be fine. When I wake up in the morning, it'll be better because whatever reason, pain is always worse in the middle of the night. And I just kind of said, I'm just going to make myself go to sleep. And I usually did.
Now, you mentioned with the RA that they felt that the pregnancy may have been what triggered that. Is that related to the hormone changes in the body, or is it the physical changes of just the stress of carrying another human being within you and having to support that? Or
My
Is
understanding is that it's hormonal. The same reason, evidently, there's like statistically an uptick sort of around menopause for some women. I think it is. So my understanding is that, yeah. And I literally went pregnant with my daughter, had her and nursed her for a year, got pregnant with my son while nursing her, and then had him and then nursed him for a year. So there was a long 3+ year stretch where my body was just sort of up and down and hormones were crazy. And then I had very bad weaning depression after I weaned my son, which in looking back was probably somewhere in there is when the RA kind of turned on. So that's sort of what I think my story is.
So that's when you felt like the RA was starting to show symptoms. What were those symptoms?
All of a sudden my hands would be super stiff in the morning, and they were like, my 2 pointer fingers were particularly swollen and the joints were swollen, or, all of a sudden my wrists would hurt. Now, I've worked desk jobs my whole career. So the other part of my brain went, you know what? Maybe it's carpal tunnel. Maybe, you've been on a computer since you were, 10 years old, pretty much, because I was kind of in that first wave of computer lab kids. So maybe it's carpal tunnel, get a different mouse pad and keep going. So that was my hands and my wrists were the first symptom. And then as I would get particularly stressed out, if the kids were sick, if I was sick, if something would happen, as is again apt to do when you have 2 little ones in daycare, everybody's sick all the time. The bottoms of my feet would absolutely be on fire, to the point where I would be like crawling to the bathroom in the middle of the night just because it hurt so much to stand on the bottom of my feet. And then all of a sudden that would go away. I should have, in retrospect, there are so many things that now I'm like, yeah, why? I should have just called and done something. At one point, I did go get a test for Lyme's disease because I thought maybe that had been it. And that came back negative, and I kind of went, okay, and just moved on.
I think it's easy for us in general to discount those the early warning signs as something else, especially like you said, you mentioned like the risks with the carpal, thinking it's carpal tunnel. If we tend to be more sedentary, then I think we come up with a different excuse, especially if it's symptoms that come and go, ebb and flow. Then you're like, oh, okay, well, my back is hurting today. I must have been spending too much time sitting at a funny angle, versus going, oh, there's something like, something going on bigger than in my back. So it's until you start noticing so many small little flare up things and put those puzzle pieces together, it's easy to keep those puzzle pieces separate.
Absolutely. And I really, I'm a pro at that. Like, if there's a gold medal for ignoring stuff, it's me. I would have it.
Yeah. And I know that I'm not real familiar with RA, but I do know with MS, like any sort of stress, exercise, heat, all those things can make the symptoms flare up. So do you find that certain things, whether it be the stress or outdoor, anything like that, make your symptoms flare worse?
For me, it's really stress. I love the heat. Give me summer all the time. Foods don't, I know some people who can't eat certain foods that makes them flare. I've tested a lot of stuff. That doesn't seem to be my issue. It's really stress and sleep are the 2 big things that if I'm overly anxious about something, if I'm very stressed out, my knees will start to hurt. And that is my big red flag of like, let me take a step back and assess what's going on. Because normally my knees have been pretty good, but for whatever reason, when I get particularly stressed out, that's like the weak spot. So now at least my red flag goes off and goes, okay, what are you doing that's causing this? Or what maybe you're not even keyed into that's causing it. And if it is something that I know is going on that is stressing me out, it's a matter of taking a breath and going, you're doing all you can, you're fixing it X, Y, and Z, and calming myself down and trying to stop it before it gets worse.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned that you had some testing done, and I'm curious because I had met with a naturopath, and I believe it was called IgG testing, which is test you for food sensitivities. Is that type of test? Is that what you were kind of referring to?
I didn't have any like formal testing done. I was sort of just going through like,
Gotcha.
Internet sleuthing.
Gotcha.
It was the middle of the pandemic, really. And I was kind of like, you know what? Let's take a look. Is it nitrates? Is it potatoes? Is it tomato sauce? And I just food logged what I was eating. And then after, a while of doing that, again, because I was home, because I could take the time to track those kind of things. And we were eating a lot of the same stuff because it was easier to do with a 5 and a 7-year-old in the house, and my husband who likes to cook, to kind of keep us on a track. So I didn't never notice any patterns. But when I did notice patterns was around periods of stress or if something would happen. And then if I saw something coming down the pike that I knew was going to be stressful, I could sort of try and get in the right headspace ahead of that.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we'd take a brief pause in our podcast to enjoy what I call a mini mindful moment. Now, mindfulness is, if you're not familiar with the concept, that is the practice of just being present in this particular moment in time. We're not thinking about things that have happened in the past. We're not thinking of things that are coming up. We're simply in this here and now. So I encourage you to join us on a little mindful moment here as I guide you through how to quiet your mind. One of my favorite techniques of that is simply become focused on my breath. So if you settle in, close your eyes, try to quiet your mind, and simply focus on taking a nice deep breath in through your nose, feeling it all the way down from your diaphragm all the way up, and hold it. And then release that breath through the mouth. One big, long breath out. And there should be no other thoughts going through your mind. Just simply focus on breathing in. Nice deep breath in through the nose. And hold it. And deep breath out through your mouth, releasing all that tension in your body, feeling yourself connected to nothing more than your body and your mind. You hear any outside noises, just simply push them away. Only concentrate on that breath. Deep breath in, hold it, and a nice long breath out. And if you find your mind starting to wander, bring it back to focusing on nothing more than the process of those deep breath in all the way through the very bottom of your pit of your stomach, all the way up into your lungs. Nice and deep breath, and hold it. And a nice deep breath out. Simply quieting your mind and focusing only on those nice deep breaths in and a long breath out. And then take just a couple seconds, a few more breaths on your own. I won't guide you through these. If you find your mind starting to wander, just bring it right back to just focusing on the breath and nothing more. Give you a couple seconds to do a few deep breaths. And on your last exhale, nice deep exhale, and open your eyes and come back to the present moment and join us back on the remainder of our podcast.
You talked a little bit about like your symptoms and things like that, but for somebody who's undiagnosed or like what technically is rheumatoid arthritis, and what are the typical things that somebody would see in the beginning stages, and like where would they go? What type of doctor would they see? Like just like a path if somebody's dealing with symptoms without a diagnosis.
Yeah, if you're dealing with chronic joint pain, like just you can't figure out if you injured yourself, you weren't just working out, you didn't do something, you didn't fall out of bed, you didn't sleep weird, it doesn't clear itself up in a day or two, and it just is nagging and won't go away. Stiffness, particularly in the morning, is a sign, especially if you've never had it before. It is something you should not ignore. It could be a few things. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be RA. So don't be like me and just like, while it could be Lyme's, like I had originally gone and gotten tested for. But if somebody out there is having sort of noticing a pattern of being stiff in the morning, having red, warm to the touch, painful joints, particularly a lot of people say, it starts in their hands and their wrists. Certainly that was the case for me. Don't ignore it. Go to your GP. They will likely refer you to a rheumatologist, and a rheumatologist will likely go get you blood work done where they're going to look at your inflammation markers and see how high your inflammation markers are, because that is really the thing. It is your immune system. It is an autoimmune disease where your immune system thinks that your healthy joints are actually invasive attacking cells. So it attacks your joints. It's all mixed up. It's confused. It's attacking the wrong thing. And that is what degeneratively wears down and destroys your joints. So once you get to the rheumatologist, they'll look at you and they will send you for blood work, probably x-rays. That was certainly my first step, just to get a baseline. And from there, there's seropositive RA and seronegative RA. I personally am seronegative, so when they do that particular test for RA, I come up as negative, but I have all of the other constellation of markers, so I still have that diagnosis. So one does not exclude the other. So that would be my advice: is just don't ignore it and don't put it off.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because years ago, I saw a rheumatologist and they checked me and they said that I carried the RA factor, but I was not considered an active RA, which is it. Like I didn't realize there was a difference. So then there's like, okay, well then it's fibromyalgia. So, but now every time I start getting that achy, I always keep thinking it's a fibro flare. But now I'm like, well, maybe I need to make another visit to the rheumatologist that I haven't seen in 15 years, just to make sure that things have not changed, especially as you older, things can shift.
Absolutely.
Now is RA I know it sounds like it's like it flares and it settles down and it kind of goes through that that sort of bounce, but is it also a progressive disease that it can get worse? And what does that look like?
It's progressive. So it, especially if left unchecked, if your inflammation is left unchecked and you don't do anything about it, it will continue, your body will continue to attack your healthy joints and it will destroy them over time. So that is why it is so important to not ignore it and to get on medication that is going to bring down your inflammation markers, and to do any sort of lifestyle changes you might need to do, whether that's exercise or changing your diet, anything that for you as a particular person, anything that causes you to flare, to try and avoid those things and to try and strengthen the rest of your muscles and tissue around those joints so that they have sort of the right infrastructure to stay healthy. So yes, it is progressive, if left, particularly if left unchecked.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, have you made a lot of dietary changes since your diagnosis? Because like you mentioned, I know that there's certain foods like dairy and sugars and carbs that can increase your inflammation in your body. Do you try to stay away from all that ultra processed and all those
I try and stay
foods?
away from ultra processed. Not so much. Listen, if I had it my way, I'm a real lazy eater. I don't cook. My husband does the cooking, so we eat healthy primarily because we're trying to set a good example for our kids. If left unchecked, I will eat Doritos and drink Coke and not, and because I don't have flares due to food, it's a really, I kind of wish I did a little bit, just to remind me to eat better when I'm on my own. So I try and eat healthy, and I try and stay away from ultra processed food. But I am a sucker for some sugar wafers and Cheez-Its or Cool Ranch Doritos on a bad day, particularly if I'm not feeling well. I sort of let myself have some cheat food because I don't get a flare from it. And it makes me feel better sometimes.
And sometimes even if you were one, like I know I'm guilty about, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to pay for this later, but I really want this right now because I need it mentally. I need something like that to make me mentally better. So like,
yeah.
you got to weigh that. You got to weigh the consequences.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'm currently trying to convince my neurologist that chocolate every day will heal my MS because my husband one time got me this little sign and it said, I would quit eating chocolate, but I'm not a quitter. And so I always had to laugh at that.
Dark chocolate is actually good for you. They say a little bit of dark chocolate.
Oh,
I do also notice that if I go on those healthy, I was like, okay, no more junk food. And then it actually ends up, I'm better off allowing a little bit of junk food here and there versus saying no junk food, because then eventually I'll reach this point of like sitting in front of the television with an entire bag of taco flavored Doritos and, a 2-liter Coke Zero and, and, just going at it. And then you feel even worse than if you had just had like a handful and like a couple sips of soda.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Doritos should totally sponsor this podcast since we're
they're so
we're all Dorito fans. I'm just happy. Like my favorite flavor is the taco flavor, and you can't find them very often, but right now they have them out again. So I've been restocking those.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a question real quick because you said that your rheumatoid arthritis kind of came about after you had your kids. So how did you deal with like just being a mom to young kids and having all the pain? Like how old were they when you were actually diagnosed?
They were 5 and 7.
Yeah. How did you deal with just being a mom and running around and not feeling well?
The same way I kind of dealt with my entire life before that. I mean, honestly, I think the universe works in mysterious ways, and the same tools I had used to cope with kind of wanting to run around and do all the things I wanted to do as a kid and a teenager. That same part of my brain that helped me fight through and just get stuff done did the same thing for me when they were little. I just knew I didn't have any other choice. And I got really good at a lot of, my kids still talk about this and they're older now, but we used to have this game where I would sit on the couch and I'd throw a blanket over my head and they would go like hide in this little like nook we had, and I would yell out like two types of food and they would come out and have to like pretend we were basically doing like improv, and I was shouting, and they still remember that. And that was just because like I was so tired and I was feeling bad. But I kind of took that, again, this like theater kid part of me that I did as, you know, a kid, and kind of figured out a way around it. And so I'd throw a blanket over my head and shout out two suggestions, and then they would come out and act it out. And they still talk about it as one of their favorite things that we did. And it was purely because I did not have it in me to run around with them or to color or draw or do, you know, my hands were killing me. So stuff like that, I got real creative.
That's so fun.
Yeah, that sounds like that actually almost gave you more of an opportunity to make even more special memories than if you weren't dealing with that on a regular basis.
We also did a lot of like, again, me sitting on the couch, and I have videos of this where we would make puppets, or I'd, you know, make sock puppets. And then they'd sit on the other side of the coffee table and the two of them would act out a story. And again, I'd kind of yell out, "Oh, now you're a princess and a dragon." And they would do that. So it was just a matter of like, okay, if from here, what can I have them do? And I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of Disney time. There was a lot of movies. There was a lot of me reading books. And I did not feel bad about it, because that serves its purpose too. And I don't think any mom who's dealing with chronic illness should feel bad about if they need to take a time putting Moana on for the 85th time and just checking out and being there and letting the kids do that.
Yeah. Think about the memories. I mean, they're telling you, you know, they're remembering all these instances. So obviously, you know, they didn't notice a difference. They're still looking back on those times as wonderful memories. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Now that I can be more active, they definitely have clocked in the last year, like, "Oh, you're out here playing badminton with us," or "We were able to do this hike," or "We were able to, you know, do X, Y, and Z," which is really nice.
Yeah. It sounds like the new medication has really made a difference on how much you're able to do on a daily basis.
Absolutely life-changing, honestly. And from the jump, I mean, I thought there'd be, you know, my doctor told me, "Oh, it might take 3 to 6 months for this to really kick in." I mean, and part of this might have been psychological, but I felt like the next day it was like, oh, the sunshine came back.
Is that awesome. An infusion or an injection or pills?
Injection.
Injection, yeah.
So right now it's every other week. I do it before I go to bed. I tend to have a headache the next day. But again, I can sort of live with that if that's the cost.
And then also it sounds like your story of, as far as that at first initial medication that they tried and it didn't work, or it worked for a very short amount of time before your body adjusted to it, is just, it helps reiterate the fact that it's easy to get discouraged when you're like, okay, this is going to help me feel better. And it's like, well, nope, it didn't really work. So don't give up on trying other things, because, you know, it's not there's a reason why there's multiple different options out there for different medications and stuff.
Right. So, and, you know, we're starting on the hydroxychloroquine or the Plaquenil, is kind of like the base, like the starter thing for a lot of people. I didn't want it, and nor did he kind of want it either. I didn't go on any sort of prednisone or a steroid. I didn't want to deal with that, and I knew that I could like tough it out until it kicked in. And then it worked for, I'd say 6 to 8 months, but by that 1 year mark, I was like, I'm back to square one. We got to, you know, and the blood work confirmed that.
Now your Instagram is called Flare Free Creations. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So tell me, when you started that, like what was your inspiration, for that name, and like, what do you do on your Instagram page?
I started it a couple months ago. It's fairly new. I've had Instagram personally for like a long time and had fun with it. But I started this because I was in a couple of Facebook groups for moms with RA, people for RA, and they were great. I also felt like it was a pretty negative space, which has its purpose, but it wasn't doing a whole lot for my mental health. So I had to check out. And I said, like, maybe I can go make my own thing. So I'm also really passionate about trying to find ways that moms and just people with RA, but also just other autoimmune diseases can sort of refine that thing that they're passionate about, thing that they want to get back into that has been taken from them in one form or another. The same way that I kind of I've constantly had to pivot my interests over pretty much over the course of my life, depending on what I've been physically able to do. And it was to that end that I created Flare Free Creations, because I wanted to talk to people about what they loved, what they want, the experience of having an autoimmune disease, being a parent, but just also just existing in this world. And then what do people love to do, and what products can I design? Can I help them design? Can we collab that would make life easier, whether that's medicine trackers or appointment trackers or things that would help with brain fog just around the house, or parenting, how to parent both with autoimmune, but also parenting kids who have autoimmune, since I've been on both sides of the spectrum. And just really making connections with people and finding out, okay, you love to do this. Well, here's a course, or here's who I've been talking to that does that. So it's been a lot of that, and kind of educating myself on what does it look like to create a product and brand it and get it out into the world in a way that it's going to be able to help people.
Do you work outside of the home?
Yeah, I am the assistant director for an MPO, so I do nonprofit fundraising.
Okay. I wasn't sure I know you had mentioned how it impacts your wrists and hands and such like that. So I wasn't sure if that still made a big enough impact that you had to step away.
Yeah, no, luckily not. I also am lucky that my employer has been great at, do you need this? Do you need that? I now have a standing desk because that's really helped. And just whatever kind of keyboard I need, they've been awesome at accommodating.
That's good.
Reasonable.
That's good.
That's great.
Hard to find a lot of times somebody who's understanding with the ups and downs of chronic illness. It's hard to find a good job that will allow you to take the time that you need.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to share with our listeners? It can be anything you want.
If your body's giving you signs, take them and get it looked at. It might be something, it might be nothing. It might just be that you are, particularly if you're a new mom and a new parent, that you're just very tired and your body is adjusting to a lack of sleep schedule. But on the off chance that it is something that you can head off at the pass, please do it. Please listen. And on the flip side of that, don't listen to all the noise that's out there. If you do get diagnosed with something, there's a lot of noise and negativity and worst case scenarios. And I would plead with you to find a positive space for you to go through that diagnosis grief process, that do it in a healthy way with people who can cheer you on.
Very important advice there on that.
Thank you so much for coming on today, because I think a lot of us have heard of rheumatoid arthritis, but not to the extent that, we've been able to talk about today. And And I think that you give just great advice, because I think as women, as moms, we do tend to ignore our symptoms and say, oh, it's this or it's that, or I don't have time. I've got to do this for everybody else. And so I think the advice of just listening to your body, and if something is not right, to make it a priority, I think that's just great advice. We will make sure and tag your page on the description
Great.
of the podcast so that people can follow you.
Yay.
And I think your approach on your Instagram page is really interesting. So I'm hoping a lot of people will get on there. It's very much a positive page. And I've really enjoyed, being a part of it and all of that.
Awesome.
So I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. What you guys are doing is a great service, and I look forward to keep listening.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I mean, you can just tell when somebody's just genuinely nice and just a good person. And I love what she's doing with her Instagram page. And it's just amazing how long she was in pain without really getting, she was 25 before she really started getting into figuring out what was going on and all of that. And I just can't, a lot of the people we're talking to are just, they have years and years and years of just pain, and before they can finally get some relief. And I'm glad she's finally getting some relief.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I'm excited to see how Dani does, in the long run. Hopefully she's found the right medicine. And I know with MS and things, it can be triggered by like stress and hormones and surgeries and things like that. So I wonder if rheumatoid arthritis is the same thing, and her pregnancy just, lit everything up for her, so to speak.
Yeah. It sounds like that's what the doctor's theories are on that.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us this week as we were able to bring you 2 Spoonie stories with Kate and Dani. And we're going to do the same thing next week. As we're ending our season 1, we're going to give you another double episode of interviews. Next Tuesday, we'll sit down with Miranda, who's going to talk about her journey with POTS. And we're really excited to talk with her. We hope that you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you Tuesday. Take care.